Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we start a new unit. So, new haircut, new unit, they go hand in hand together. Don't ask me if I planned it. All right. We are starting unit 2. Unit 2 is kind of a long one. Because we are covering topics about revolutions through 4 chapters. So it is the quintessential unit covering different chapters, different lessons, and obviously different topics, but relating to revolution. So today is a 2 title note day. Y'all know the business. So at the top of your margin in your notes, make sure you put Age of Revolution Unit 2. All right. And then what we're talking about today, War and Revolution in England, Chapter 2, Lesson 2. So the only notes we're taking from Chapter 2, War and Revolution in England. So let's get started. That was your warm-up. Objectives, we're going to use timelines to understand England's move from absolutism to constitutional monarchy. And then we're going to compare and contrast the views of Thomas Hobbes, John Locke on political power. We kind of already talked about that. So where are we? We're going a little bit backwards in time to really understand the different, how could you call it? Just the differences, the different starts for these countries, and how England became England. If you don't see this, England has always had claims in France. France is down here. This is England, well, the United Kingdom. And so we're going to talk about that. Okay, so a brief history. I tried my best to cut stuff that you didn't need to know. It was nice to know, but not what you need to know. So the things in red are what you need to know. Remember. All right, so feudalism is just a loose organization style of government. You have rich local lords dividing their lands among lesser lords. And in exchange, these lesser lords, called vassals, provide the knights to fight for their lords' battles. The greater lords pledge loyalty to even more powerful lords, lords on lords on lords. And the greatest lord of them all, the king. So the king gives his land to the nobles. Remember, rich people. The rich people give a fief or more land to these knights, vassals. These knights and vassals protect everyday peasants like me and you. And in return, the peasants provide food and services for the knights. The knights provide protection and military service to the rich people, because rich people don't fight. Come on now. And rich people provide money and knights for the king. Good stuff. All right, so monarchs in the church. So monarchs relied on nobles for providing knights for their wars and loyalty to them. Kind of like an ego boost. But sometimes these nobles and the church had more power than the monarchs. Both monarchs and both nobles and the church had their own courts. They collected their own taxes, and they even had their own army. So they will protect against any effort of a ruler trying to increase their authority over them. So they're going to try and keep what's theirs, and not give it away, which is kind of weird because they just give, knights to the king. But some people, some nobles thought they were too rich, too hoity-toity for the king. So that's going to lead to some struggles. All right. So around 1066, there is a throne vacancy. Anglo-Saxon King Edward died without an heir. And as we know in monarchy, it's passed down hereditarily through males and or daughters. William and Harold lay claims to the throne. William sails from Normandy. He's French. He sails from Normandy across the English Channel to battle Harold, who is Edward's brother-in-law. It is called the Battle of Hastings. All you need to know, William triumphs, William wins, William becomes the king, and he is called William the Conqueror. Test question. William the Conqueror. So now you have Norman French and Anglo-Saxon customs, languages, and traditions are now being blended together. So Anglo-Saxons are what I believe the Vikings called people from England, and Normandy French, France. So mixture of both. So if you've ever seen The Tudors on HBO, which you probably shouldn't have, but when they introduce the kings during this time period, they will call them the kings of England, Scotland, Wales, or Ireland, and France. And that little France bit comes from this. Not like you needed to know that, but I'm here for it. So common law under Henry II, the kings couldn't write laws on their own, but they had to follow accepted customs. They found new ways to expand these customs into law. And now, soon enough, under Henry, common law applied to all of England. They will standardize laws and punishments. Local citizens show up to take part in trials. Juré, meaning, which is French, which is sworn to oath. And so you kind of think of a jury duty. I think of that. So that's Henry II. I am. All right, King John struggles. So he is son of Henry. He was a greedy and clever ruler. He's known throughout history through his struggles with the French king and the Pope. He will have his own power struggle with his own nobles. He will put oppressive taxes on his nobles. So a rebellious group of these nobles or barons forced him to accept this new document called the Magna Carta, or Great Charter. Magna Carta. The significances of the Magna Carta. Rights were soon extended to all English citizens, and monarchs must obey the law. Just because you're the king doesn't mean you don't have to follow these laws or customs. You must. Because, I mean, if your leader's not going to follow laws, how are you going to get your people to follow laws? That's just me. All right, barons protecting their own. So legal rights of townspeople into the church were also enacted in the Magna Carta. There's a clause protecting every free man from arbitrary arrest, imprisonment, or other legal actions except by the legal judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. This is called due process of law. The king will also agree not to raise new taxes without consulting his great council of lords and clergy. And this is kind of where Parliament gets its beginnings. This great council of nobles and clergy is going to evolve into Parliament. If you think of the French word parler, parlay, which is French meaning to talk. Parliament will help unify England. In 1295, Edward I summoned Parliament to approve money for his wars in France. He will arrange for representatives of the common people to join these lords and clergy. And these common people would send 2 knights from each county, because that's how England's divided, counties, not states, and delegates. So when I think of Parlay, I think of Captain Jack Sparrow and Parlay. All right, so evolving on its own. So this assembly will set up England's framework for England's legislature. It's a two-house body of parliament. You have the House of Lords, that great council, nobles and clergy. Think of it as the upper house. And then the bottom house is the House of Commons, the knights and middle-class citizens. You need to know those two. Test question. So France and England later will fight over almost everything and anything: land claims, politics, women, soccer teams. Just kidding, soccer wasn't invented back then. So you have 100 years of strife. Economic rivalry and a growing sense of nationalism were at the root of this struggle. But in the end, England will almost lose all of its land claims in France. This war was destructive and it changed England politically. English rulers will keep asking Parliament for funds. And this idea of the power of the purse, meaning they have won the right to approve taxes in Parliament. And Parliament said that the king could, Parliament could insist the king meet the demands before voting. And that was also like a check or limiting the power of the monarch. So before even voting to approve taxes in Parliament, Parliament could kind of strong arm the king into agreeing to what they wanted first before voting. Kind of like a blackmail. All right. The meat and potatoes of this all is the Tudor dynasty, the Tudor and Stuart dynasty, which I took a history class in college about this, so I'm kind of gonna nerd out on you just a little bit, but we're gonna look at the Tudors, where we have Henry VII, Henry VIII, and then a big fat mess. So this is Henry VIII. I am. So long story short, Henry was married to a Catholic princess, Catherine of Aragon, from Spain. She is Catholic. Did I say Catherine? Catherine of Aragon. She is Catholic. And back in the day, right, divorce is hush hush. You don't want to do it. You're screwed for the afterlife. It's against God's commandments. And Henry, wanting a son, had difficulty getting a son with Catherine. So he's going to go to the Pope, say, yo, Mr. Pope, annul my marriage to Catherine. She's not giving me a son. And Henry was actually betrothed to Catherine because his older brother died. So he stepped up and wanted to marry Catherine, that was his duty. He had to marry her because his brother died before they could get married. So Catherine, it was kind of like a marriage, not really going anywhere. So Henry says, hey, Pope, I'm the king of England. I follow your laws, but like, she isn't the one I wanted to marry. She's not giving me a son. She's had so many miscarriages, stillborn births, infants dying. It's not me. I'm the king. Well, the Pope is going to say no. And Henry, being the king of England, says, I'm going to create my own religion. So he severs ties with the Catholic Church in Rome and creates his own Church of England. And from there, since he's the king, leader of the church, he can annul any marriage he wants. So he will divorce Catherine because he was getting some on the side and marries a Protestant, Anne Boleyn. And if you don't know, Catholics and Protestants, they don't mix. Anne Boleyn, while promising to give Henry a son, doesn't give him a son, gives him a daughter. By the way, Catherine of Aragon also gave him a daughter. So he's got daughters, he doesn't have sons. So he will divorce Anne Boleyn and then, She will be accused of treason. He'll actually execute. Well, he doesn't execute her, but she's put on trial for treason, and she gets executed. He will marry another woman, Jane Seymour. He finally gets a son, King Edward, right here. Edward. And, well, he was kind of sickly, always, he had some issues with health growing up. And so he will die young. He will actually lead from 1547 to 1553, as you see. Henry dies at, what is that, 38? Ooh, I'm 33. So Henry dies at 38, and his son lives for 16 years, and he rules for about 6 years. But then he dies, and now Parliament and the Kingdom of England don't know who's going to lead. Is it going to go back to his cousin in Scotland, or his brother-in-law to Scotland, to the north, or will it go to his daughters? Well, you don't know. Scotland is like not liked by England very much, so they want to keep it in the family. So you have his firstborn daughter Mary, and his from his first marriage, and his second marriage daughter Elizabeth. So Mary assumes the throne as the oldest heir. She will restore Catholicism back in England. By the way, this is a time period called the Protestant Reformation going on in England at the time. Martin Luther, the English Reformation, stuff like that. So again, Protestants and Catholics don't mix, and Henry was kind of influenced a little bit to instill Protestantism in England, while Mary, being Catholic from Spain, her mom Catholic from Spain, she's going to put Catholicism back because, well, people hated on Henry a lot. So she is going to lead a rampage of those who accuse her father of trying to get rid of Catholic traditions. She is called Bloody Mary. I believe there was one instance where she burned 200 people at the stake for, being basically petty for people disliking her father. Hey, that's loyalty. Mary dies in 1558. So she only ruled for about 5 years after her younger half brother. So her younger half sister takes the throne to become the next monarch. And she is Protestant. So she will undo what Mary just tried to do and starts to restore Protestantism across the realm. That's Mary. She gets the nickname Bloody Mary for killing all those Protestants. The Queen Elizabeth the First. Like father, like daughter, both Henry and Elizabeth recognized the value of good relations with Parliament. They continue to consult Parliament over issues related to finances and wars. And again, Protestantism, protesting questionable church practices. We got Martin Luther in Germany posting his 95 Theses, saying that the church is wrong for selling indulgences. Hey, buy this indulgence for 20 pounds or whatever, $20, and you'll go to heaven right away. Here's a piece of paper. And of course, divorce. It was hush hush. So again, the Protestant Reformation is going on at this time. Catholic Church will try and resist those groups. And Catherine Elizabeth is going to rule for the next, 50 some odd years. She's going to die in 1603. And then the power, she dies heirless. So they can't go back to King Henry because King Henry's son died without barely reaching reproductive age. Okay. I'm going backwards, I know. Sorry. So Edward dies, and then his sister comes to power, And then she dies of sickness. And then Elizabeth comes to power, and she rules for almost 50 years, 1558 to 1603. Well, she don't got no kids, man. And so you got to trace it back to, well, Henry's brother-in-law, because that's his sister, Margaret Tudor, married James IV of Scotland, and then his son, James V of Scotland, married Marie de Guise, and she had a daughter, Mary, Queen of Scots, who will then see how this is starting to get a little crazy. So Margaret Tudor, after the king dies, Margaret Tudor marries Archibald. She has a daughter, Lady Margaret Douglas, who marries Matthew Stuart, Earl of Lennox, who then has 2 sons, Henry Stuart, who will marry Mary, Queen of Scots, and who will rule Scotland at the same time Elizabeth's in power. And then their son is James VI of England, or James VI of Scotland. So it's ugly, right? It's ugly. So this is where we are. So this now we're at the meat and potatoes of where your textbook starts. All that stuff before, the last 15 minutes, that was purely for your enjoyable research. Now we're getting into the meat and potatoes. So King of England and Scotland. So the Tudor dynasty ends with Elizabeth's death in 1603. So her cousin, King James VI of Scotland, ascends to power. Scotland is to England as Canada is the United States. We make fun of them a lot. I mean, they don't have universal health care back then, so you can't really say that. But back in the day, you don't like Canada like England doesn't like Scotland. So the Stuarts, however, weren't as popular as the Tudors or with Parliament. James was a heavy believer in the divine right of kings, that claim to power that was given to him by God, even though assumptions were made that King K and Parliament P ruled together. Puritans, or the Protestants in England, inspired by Calvinist ideas, did not like the king's strong defense in the COE, Church of England. While they were still members of the Church of England, Puritans wished to remove any remaining resemblances to Catholicism. In 1611 and 1614, James will dissolve Parliament. Parliament meets like, hey guys, come together. We're going to meet. We're going to come up with laws. We're going to discuss taxes. And then the king says, all right, meeting adjourned or whatever, right? Well, him being new to how Parliament is run, he's not going to like what Parliament is doing. So he's like, I don't have to follow what you guys say. I'm the king. This is that divine right? So he's going to dissolve Parliament. So England's gentry, or the well-to-do landowners, that will become Puritans, and they will hold a prominent position in the House of Commons, the lower house. So the drama ensues after James's death. His son Charles takes the throne. Charles had similar beliefs in the divine right of kings like his daddy. He imprisoned foes without trial and squeezed the country for money. Because now you have Scotland and England. It's like WWE Universal Champion versus the WWE SmackDown Champion. It's Roman Reigns. Here we go. Let me know if you watch wrestling. I don't. I just know that. So Charles is going to need money to fight wars, because wars cost money. And he's going to need to raise taxes, so he had to call Parliament. So in 1628, Parliament passed what is called the Petition of Right, which placed limits on the king's ability to tax, imprison citizens, quarter troops, and institute martial law. It would also prohibit the king from raising taxes without the consent of Parliament. So Charles will accept this Petition of Right, but later ignores it after it diminished his power. He's like, why did I even sign this? Get rid of it. So Charles tries to impose more ritual on the Church of England. the Puritans will flee to America rather than accepting his policies. So the English Reformation, this, kind of has influences in American history. So this is James the First. You like to see some pictures. James the Sixth and First, James the Sixth of Scotland, James the First of England. And here's his son, Charles. This was the style, this little like V for Vendetta mask we got going on here. All right, Civil War. Ooh, the T. So in 1640, Charles will need more money to fend off those rebellious Scots that were trying to take over, because he's over in England, not taking care of his country in Scotland. So Parliament will launch its own revolt in return. It's called the Long Parliament. And Parliament tried and executed the king's officers and ministers, declared that Parliament couldn't be dissolved without its own consent. So you can't get rid of us unless we get rid of ourselves, unless we agree. So it's all about consent, people. So there then begins a civil war because the king's not going to have this. So civil war starts between the supporters of the king, they're called the Cavaliers, and the parliamentary forces called the Roundheads. So Parliament forces will prove to be victorious largely because of this new model army led by a military genius, Oliver Cromwell. The new model army consisted of more extreme Puritans, aka independents, whose beliefs thought they were doing the battle for God. Cromwell also deserves some credit as his soldiers were well disciplined and trained in military tactics of the 1600s, the new military tactics. The new model army wasted no time in taking over control as Cromwell will purge any members of Parliament who did not support him. Charles, after this, is condemned to die. He was labeled a tyrant, a traitor, a murderer, and a public enemy. You don't want to be called those things. Those are very bad things back in the day. So what was left of this so-called rump parliament, you know, people that were stayed after Cromwell got rid of them all who weren't loyal to him, this rump parliament, they will execute King Charles I on January 30th, 1649. And this is very important because the common people, the people below the king, said, we are tired of you. We voted to kill you. You are dead. So it's the first time ever in history that a monarch was tried and executed by his own people. This will scare monarchs all across Europe because if common people heard that the common people in Germany, common people in Switzerland, Italy heard that the common people in England killed their king, wow, they just set a precedent. Parliament sent a message. No ruler could claim absolute power and ignore the rule of law. Parliament then abolished the monarchy in the House of Lords and declared England a commonwealth, kind of like a republic. Cromwell then finds it hard to work with his rump parliamentarians and will disperse it by force, and he will set up a military dictatorship. Cromwell will also exile Catholics to Ireland, and also Puritans' influence in government and society begins during this time. Hello. All right, so this is a English Civil War map. You got the Cavaliers, the Royalists versus the Parliamentarians. And then, you know, it's blue versus, oh my gosh, it's blue versus red. Blue versus purple. So in the end, what was it fought? Like 3 years, 3-year battle. This is Oliver Cromwell. And this is I found this. This is the execution of the King, Charles. So what do we do now? What do we do now? Well, Cromwell dies in 1658. Puritans, trying to purify everything of the world, will lose favor. People are getting tired of them, and people are tired of this military dictatorship. So they're like, hey, let's go back to what worked. Let's elect a new parliament, 1660. And in parliament, they're like, we don't want a military dictatorship. Let's bring back the king. So they restore the monarchy. And in a shocking result, they invite Charles's son to come back to power. They invited him. So this is also called the Restoration period in England. The restoration of the Stuart monarchy, however, didn't mean the work of the English Revolution was undone. Parliament kept much of its power and had won and continued to play an important role of government. The principle that Parliament must be given its consent to taxation was accepted. However, Charles II continued to push his ideas that were clearly out of step with the English people. Charles II shared his father's absolute faith in absolute monarchy and secretly had Catholic sympathies, but his brother James did not hide the fact that he supported Catholicism. Parliament's suspicions about their Catholic leanings were aroused when Charles took the bold step to suspend laws Parliament had passed against Catholics and Puritans after the restoration of the monarchy. Parliament disagreed heavily with and forced the king to back down. Parliament then passed the Test Act, specifying that only Anglicans, members of the Church of England, could hold military and civil offices. On his deathbed, Charles II converted to Catholicism. Ooh, drama. Dying without an heir, his brother James II became king in 1685. As king, James put Catholics in high positions in the government, army, navy, and universities. Once again, disproving your Protestant parliament. Once again, religion became a cause of conflict between the king and parliament. Parliament disagreed with his policies and knew that he was an old man, and his Protestant daughters, Mary and Anne, born to his first wife, would succeed him. However, James and his second wife, another Catholic, had a son. And there was a looming possibility with the promise of the monarchy staying Catholic. The drama. Here's Charles II. Here's James II. Is this a hat? No, it's not a hat. Glorious. So English Protestants feared that he would restore Roman Catholicism back in England. So in 1688, Parliament invited Mary, his daughter, and her Dutch Protestant husband, William of Orange, to England to invade and become the rulers. This invitation put William and Mary in a difficult position. It would be appalling for Mary to upstage her father, but William was a foe of France and welcomed the opportunity to fight with them using England's resources. William made plans to invade, but it wasn't until October that year that James figured out the plot. So in November, William landed in Torbay and worked his way towards London. His army was sent out, but James's army was quickly sent out, but they deserted him, and his daughter and husband defected from the king. So James headed back to London to have him and his family flee to France. With almost no bloodshed, test question, England had undergone a glorious revolution. That's why it's so glorious. No blood was shed. The issue is not if the monarchy would exist, just who would be the next monarch. So January 1689, Parliament offered the throne to William and Mary. They accepted it along with the Bill of Rights, which contained many of the same ideas of the Petition of Right. This bill set forth Parliament's right to make laws and levy taxes. It also made it impossible for the kings to impose or to do without Parliament by stating standing armies could only be raised by Parliament's consent. The rights of citizens to keep arms and to have a jury of trial were also confirmed. Here's William and Mary. English Bill of Rights. So the English Bill of Rights created a system based on the rule of law and a freely elected parliament. The rule of law holds that all people are subject to the same laws, even someone such as the king or queen. Oh my gosh. It limits the power of monarchs and forces them to make decisions that of the laws of the state. Under this law, a monarch's power was no longer absolute. The idea was a dramatic break in the political thought of England's past. This bill laid the foundation for a limited or constitutional monarchy. Another important action by Parliament was the Toleration Act of 1689, which granted Puritans, but not Catholics, the right of free worship. It did mark a turning point in English history where few citizens would ever again be persecuted for religion, unless you're a Catholic. By deposing one king and establishing another, Parliament had destroyed the divine right theory of kingship. William was, after all, king by the grace of Parliament, not by the grace of God. Parliament had asserted its right over to the right to be part of the government. It didn't have complete control, over the government, but it now had the right to participate in affairs of state. Hobbs versus Locke. Oh, we're not done yet. Concerns over power reflected in English legal and political thought. William Blackstone, a judge and professor of law, argued that political stability could be achieved through a revived emphasis of English common law. Two English political thinkers, Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, provided their own responses to the English Revolution of the 17th century. Hobbes was alarmed by the revolutionary upheavals in England. 1651, he published his work, The Leviathan, to try and deal with the problem of disorder. Hobbes argued that before an organized society was created, humans were guided not by reason or moral ideas, but by a ruthless struggle for self-preservation. To save themselves from destroying one another, people made a social contract and agreed to form a state. People in the state agreed to be governed by an absolute ruler with unlimited power to suppress rebellion and preserve order. Locke was opposite. He viewed the exercise of political power quite differently. His two treatises on civil government, published 1690, argued against the absolute rule of one person. Unlike Hobbes, Locke believed that before society was organized, humans lived in a state of equality and freedom rather than a state of war. As a result, all humans had certain natural rights which they were born with: right to life, liberty, property. Like Hobbes, Locke believed that people found it difficult to protect their natural rights, so they agreed to establish a government to ensure the protection of their rights and to judge those who violated them. The government would protect the rights of the people, and the people would act reasonably. However, if a government broke this contract, test question, the people within their rights were within their right to remove or alter the government to form a new one. To Locke, people meant the landholding aristocracy, not peasants. He was not an advocate for democracy, but his ideas proved important in the 18th century, as we know. The Enlightenment, Hobbes and Locke. And that is it. Whew. This was a very long lecture. I'm not going to keep you. I believe your homework is page 66, 2 through 4. Let me just get the book here because I never have everything ready. Yeah. Page 66, 2 through 4. That is your homework. So hopefully you guys did enjoy that. I know I kept talking really fast because I only get like 40 minutes of time on Zoom. So hopefully this works. Anyways, hopefully you guys did enjoy that. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.